Us, a 2006 documentary by Christopher Dylan Quinn, is the story of 3 Sudanese refugees resettling in America. It covers some of the political and social issues surrounding the Sudanese Civil War, the culture shock of third world refugees coming to America, and the loneliness and alienation that these displaced refugees feel. It is also a hopeful film, focusing on the good work that is being done to bring greater opportunities to those displaced by civil war. In 1987, the northern government of Sudan ordered all Christian boys in southern Sudan to be put to death. To escape death, 20,000 boys from ages 3 to 13 fled on foot to a refugee camp in Ethiopia. They remained there for 3 years until they were forced to flee again. After the collapse of Ethiopia, the boys crossed Civil War-ravaged Sudan on foot and were often shot at. The boys, reduced in number from 11,000 to 11,000 from the original 20,000 due to violence, starvation, and disease, eventually resettled at a refugee camp in Kenya. The United States supported the camp, and in this all-male society, the older men took care of the younger boys. There was little food, but they were safe from violence. In the refugee camp, the boys were unable to go back to Sudan for fear of violence. The refugees were displaced, with no idea whether their families were dead or alive. The United States agreed to grant refugee status to some of the lost boys. In 2000 to 2001, 3,800 lost boys were brought to the United States as refugees. God Grew Tired of Us follows Daniel, Panther, and John, 3 such lost boys in their 20s, from Sudan to Syracuse, New York. The documentary first shows the refugee camp, complete with harrowing footage of starving children, but it also shows the bonds of friendship that the boys in the camp share. It includes cheerful footage of the boys singing and dancing together. In the States, the refugees endure quite a culture shock. In Sudan, they lacked showers and electricity. In America, everything, from the weather and the food to the culture and the holidays, is completely different. Panther, Daniel, and John endure unique hardships in America. Due to their years of deprivation and all the violence they have witnessed, many of the lost boys suffer from post-traumatic stress and depression. While they often only had 1 meal a day at the refugee camp, they find America harsh and lonely. They miss the companionship of communal living and find that working constantly and never spending time with friends or family is lonely. Although the 3 men have a much higher quality of life in the United States, they still have many hardships. In order to pay back their airfare to the United States and support themselves, they each work 2 to 3 minimum wage jobs. The men also face alienation from American culture and racism. At one point, the boys are asked by a UN liaison not to travel in groups around Syracuse because it makes the local shopkeepers uncomfortable. Despite their hardship in the United States, for the most part, the men work their low-wage jobs cheerfully and earn enough to send money to the refugee camps, send money to their families, and enroll in college. The film also gives a refreshing view on the excess of American culture, and the fact that many American traditions are essentially meaningless. In one poignant scene, at a mall in December, John asks an onlooker, "Is Santa Claus in the Bible? What does a beautiful tree have to do with the birth of Jesus?" It really does make an American think about how odd some of our customs are. Despite the title God Grew Tired of Us and the somber subject matter of the Sudanese Civil War, the film is much more uplifting than it would seem. The 3 men take advantage of the opportunity granted them by coming to America. At one point, they organize a march in Syracuse, New York, to raise awareness about the Sudanese Civil War. By the end of the film, John, Panther, and Daniel have all either enrolled or completed college. Panther and John locate their families and are able to support them by sending money. John earns enough to send his fiancée to America. Scenes when Panther meets his mother for the first time since he was 7, and scenes from the first Lost Boys and Girls reunion in Syracuse, are genuinely uplifting. The director, Christopher Dylan Quinn, is clearly in favor of peace in Sudan, pointing out the incredible cost of civil war in this documentary. Quinn probably made the documentary in order to promote education about Sudan and hopefully encourage Americans and other wealthy viewers to send money and raise awareness to help Sudan's situation. Although Quinn depicts hardships that the men face in America, one definitely gets the idea that the United States should allow more refugees to come. Quinn has a clear agenda in God Grew Tired of Us, but I believe it is a noble one. As a privileged first world citizen, I learned about the lost boys and girls of Sudan for the first time in watching this documentary. After seeing the striking contrast between the refugee camp in Kenya and the refugees' apartment in Syracuse, I can understand better why many immigrants find assimilation to American life extremely difficult. Although many scenes show the refugees' ignorance about everyday American items such as shaving cream and Ritz crackers, the director never takes a condescending approach. In addition, the film does not only show hardships in Africa and prosperity in the United States. Rather, the film takes a balanced approach, showing the joy of the lost boys playing soccer games or singing at prayer services in Kenya, and it also exhibits hardship and loneliness in the United States. There's a lot of political stigma surrounding whether or not immigrants, especially refugees, should be allowed into the United States. The American government and the political climate have a large effect on whether or not refugees can come into America. For an average American viewer, footage of war-ravaged Sudan would make one wonder whether or not the United States should become involved. This film portrays the effects of some of the United States' immigration and refugee policies, which we will probably discuss in our AP Government class. One criticism of this film is that it glosses over the serious hardships that the Lost Boys faced while they were crossing Sudan and skips ahead to the more positive aspects of their time in America, to create a more digestible message for first world viewers. This film, according to its New York Times movie review, is the softer, Hollywood-sanctioned version of an earlier documentary, The Lost Boys of Sudan. I personally have never seen the documentary The Lost Boys of Sudan, but according to the New York Times' review, it is a harsher documentary that goes into more detail about the hardships the Lost Boys faced on their long trek through war-riddled Sudan. Some critics say that the mood of God Grew Tired of Us is too light, tempering excruciating images of hardship, suffering, and starvation with wry observations of newly arrived immigrants at their first supermarket or using electric appliances, to again quote the New York Times review. In addition, by showing the many benefits that the refugees received during their time in the States, this documentary runs the risk of casting the United States as the good guy to make American viewers feel better about themselves. Still, I believe that making this movie more digestible is not necessarily a bad thing. There's no law that says documentaries have to be depressing. The movie is still quite sad, and I don't think anyone could call it sugar-coated. And anyway, if a film is too much of a tearjerker, it will reach less viewers because fewer people will want to watch it. Because it is important that more people learn about the plight of the victims of the Sudanese Civil War, I believe the film was justified in taking a lighter approach. I would definitely recommend this film to others. It is educational, the cinematography is charming, and the film does a good job portraying the relationship between the Lost Boys. I would heartily recommend this somber but